Well, good evening. My name is Ron Matsen. This is the Q&A show here in Reporoa, New Zealand, in the executive briefing room here at the River Lodge. Genesis chapter 6 tells us that there were some strange things going on in the time of Noah. And my guest today is someone who is going to be addressing those controversial issues.
It's my hypothesis that there is a breeding program going on between the fallen angelic host of heaven and the women of earth. Why? Because the fallen one, Satan, wants to create man in his own image. That's what's going on here, the great imitator.
Well, as you can see, our guest is L.A. Marzulli. He was one of our key speakers at our Strategic Perspectives Conference in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this year. And we are privileged to have you, L.A., with us on the broadcast. L.A., welcome. And how is it where you are? Where are you at the moment?
I'm in the underground bunker, deep in an underground bunker in an undisclosed location. No, I'm in the Santa Monica Mountains, about an hour north of Los Angeles. It's a very bucolic country living, and it's been here like 35 years and love it. It's home.
Excellent. Well, L.A., you're in an area of research that is so incredibly controversial. What drew you into this aspect of research on Nephilim Angels, UFOs? They all kind of converge on top of one another. What drew you into that?
The book which was life-changing for me was Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's book, The Omega Conspiracy. I consider Dr. Thomas a mentor. I received my honorary doctorate from Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. And that book, The Omega Conspiracy, just changed everything. He answered so many questions that I had specifically in the Tanakh and specifically in the Torah. Why? What's the deal here with the flood? Why does he wipe out everybody? Why only 8 people? You know, who are these Nephilim characters that come down? What are we looking at? I was totally perplexed. And then later on, when the mandate comes down from the same holy God to wipe everyone else out in the Levant, or what's known as the Promised Land, it's like I was completely taken aback by that. It's like, what's going on here? That's genocide. It's like I never could reconcile that until I read the Omega Conspiracy, and that's going on 25 years ago. I contacted Dr. I.D.E. Thomas and interviewed him and stayed in touch with him. And as I said, I received my honorary doctorate from him, Pacifica International University, where he was the provost. Dr. Thomas pointed me to the works of Josephus. He pointed me to his bibliography, where he was drawing some of these sources from, extra biblical sources, all talking about the Nephilim. And it was fascinating. And of course, what Dr. Thomas does, and as far as I know, he may be the first person really to do this. He took what happened in Genesis, and then he takes the words of Yeshua, Jesus, and Jesus warns us it'll be like the days of Noah when he returns. That's and any student of the Bible would look at that and realize that that sentence is pregnant with meaning, and it points us back to the days of Noah and makes us go, well, what the heck differentiates the days of Noah than any other time in history? And it's, of course, it's the presence of the fallen angelic host openly manifesting on the planet and taking wives and having coitus sex with the women and producing this unholy offspring known as the Nephilim or the Nephilim.
Right. So just so that our viewing audiences they're all starting from the same point of view here. We're talking about the first couple of verses of Genesis chapter 6. And the predominant view that's preached in most seminaries, of course, is that these when it says, now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, of whom they chose. And so they were giants in the land in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bore children unto them. And so how the predominant view that you get at a seminary is that they are the offspring of Cain, interbreeding with the offsprings of Seth. I mean, why a different view?
Well, as Dr. Thomas states, and other authors have stated this before, G.H. Pember certainly went there. Josephus, the a Jewish historian from the first century, talks about the bones of the Nephilim. The Book of Enoch, pseudepigraphical book, attributed to Enoch, written by someone else, not part of the canon, I get it, but it's quoted at least 70 times in the Tanakh and referred to several times. In fact, an entire paragraph was quoted in Jude. Do we look at it in the same way we look at Scripture? No, but we can certainly appreciate its historicity and understand that it was widely quoted. The bottom line here, why would it say when men began to multiply on the earth, other men came and, I mean, it makes no sense. The nuts and bolts of the deal is this. Who are the sons of God? And that is B'nai Ha-Elohim. And it's referred to in other passages, and it's always referred to as the angelic host. Now, we can tap dance around that all we want, but when we go back to Genesis 3, we see a proclamation by the Most High God that there's going to be a war, a seed war. It says, your seed will be at enmity with the seed of the woman. Your seed is the fallen one, Satan, will be at enmity with the seed of a woman. That's a seed war. And then later on in Genesis 6, you know, how many years later, we don't know. We're not told that. But certainly a period of time transpires, and that's exactly what we see. And the seed war is so egregious that only 8 people are not contaminated. Think about this. Only 8 people. And there's a vetting process that goes down here where the Most High God says, Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. That's a vetting process. And he's sheltering those 8 people from that. He replenishes the human race. He takes the animals on board the ark. And it's all about DNA. It's all about seed. Really, that's what's going on. And it's the same thing all through Scripture. Once we understand, and look, if the fallen one wants to keep people from knowing the truth, then do exactly what is unfortunately taught in most seminaries. Because if you don't understand that, when you come to Matthew 24, Mark 13, or Luke 21, and it talks about the end days, and it talks about the seed of the serpent, we're clueless. Well, what's he talking about? You know, when you get to Matthew 24 and we find out when Jesus begins to warn us that men faint from fear from what is coming on the earth, even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. There's this whole move, counter move, and I addressed this in my book, The Cosmic Chess Match, between the Most High God and the fallen one. They are completely unequally yoked. It's not an equal match, but the whole idea is the redemption of the human race. And that's look, it comes down to this. Satan knows in the garden that someone's going to come and is going to crush his head. He knows that. And he knows that. So all he's got to do to win the cosmic chess match and show that God's a liar, don't trust him, come with me, is to prove that that's wrong. And guess what? He almost succeeds. Only 8 people are saved. The human race was contaminated. The genome was contaminated. And not only mankind, but the animals also. The Book of Enoch states that, as does the Book of Jasher. But I digress. The bottom line is here is this, that if Satan had succeeded, it game over. Cosmic chess match, game over. It's done. And we see he tries to do the same thing once he understands that through the Abrahamic line, through the line of Abraham will come Messiah. He starts the Holocaust. He starts the genocide. Why does Pharaoh wake up on a Monday morning and go, well, you better start killing those Israelites? Why does he do that? And who's whispering in Pharaoh's ear? And why is it there's a whole retinue of magicians which know the dark arts? They're able to duplicate the first 3 plagues. You know, this isn't sleight of hand nonsense. This is the real deal. They're in league. By the time Abraham shows up on the scene, or by the time Moses shows up on the scene, there's a worldwide occult Luciferian paradigm already in operation. And just like, I love what God does. He just allows, go do your thing, fallen one. Do your thing. I'll give you all the rope you want. And then he sends in 2 guys, Moses and Aaron, and everything changes. The whole dynamic changes. But he allows this worldwide, global, occult system to be in full operation before Moses is raised up. And here's something interesting, because we'll get into this later. He goes to Abraham, hey, you're going to be a great nation, but you're going to Israel. 400 years later, we're going to take you out. It's like, what? And he says, until the sin of the Amorites comes to its fullness. What the heck is that? Who are the Amorites? And that goes right back into the whole Nephilim tribes. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and Moses is writing the Torah hundreds of years after the event, being dictated by the Most High God on Sinai. Why wouldn't he just put a period there and stop if there's only one incursion? Why wouldn't the sentence just read, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days? Because they were in those days.
Yes.
That's it. It's over, right? It's not what he says. A little semicolon, and then he says, and also afterwards, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men, had sex with them, and the offspring of that holy union is the Nephilim. Guess who's in the Levant? The Nephilim.
Right.
The promised land.
Well, that gets me to my first question. This is from Gregory. He says, if all 8 people were destroyed during the great flood in Noah's time, how is it that the genetic strain of the Nephilim continued past the flood, since the Jewish people had to contend with them during their conquest of the promised land following the Exodus? So how did this reoccurrence happen after? You would think God wiped everything out, saved these 8 souls who were not genetically tainted by the Nephilim DNA. How did it happen again?
And it's very important to understand that if one of them is tainted, then why is he wiping out the whole planet? And if he knows one of them's tainted, that's crazy in my opinion. So, and there's a vetting process in Genesis which tells us, Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your son's wife. That's a vetting process. He takes the time to call it out with great specificity, and he does that deliberately. He's saying, you guys, it's a vetting process. You're coming on the ark, and he seals them himself. He seals them into the ark. He closes the door himself. I mean, that's like nothing's getting by him. He knows what's going on. If one of them's a Nephilim, then all bets are off. Here's the deal. We have this truncated view of the supernatural, so much so that in the West, most of us don't even believe it. And then the Jesus group will sit there and put their little black beads, well, frankly, I think that this miracle may have happened. Thank you. I mean, are you kidding me? We are in a supernatural world. I am a frank supernaturalist. And when we read in 2 Thessalonians that Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders, what do you think that means? And why does Paul go out of his way? Why does to warn us of that? Why does Yeshua say that men will be deceived? Right? Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Men faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth, unless those days were short and no flesh would survive. Those are dire warnings by God himself, by the Son of God, incarnate on the planet. And, at this time, there's no church, there's nothing going on, and he's saying this stuff, and people were going like, you've got to be kidding me. We have this truncated view of the enemy because we don't understand what happened in Genesis 6. We don't understand the seed war. We don't understand what's at stake. We don't understand that we are literally, as I speak right now, involved in a cosmic battle, a cosmic chess match, which is why Paul admonishes us in Ephesians 6 to put on the armor of God, cease from sinning. Here I am, Lord, use me. And begin to go out and do what? Destroy the works of the devil. And that's what we're trying to do. Right. I mean, everything that we do points back to the biblical narrative, which then amplifies Yeshua, Jesus.
Okay, then the question that Gregory had was, so we understand how the angels came down prior to the flood and infiltrated the human race. How about after the flood? The Nephilim have been killed now, but the B'nai Ha Elohim, they come again?
The fallen angels are coming back over and over and over and over again. And the same thing is happening in modernity, slightly different than what we have in antiquity. But the same type of thing is happening in modernity, in present day, which is exactly what Scripture tells us will happen. It's slightly different. It's a slightly different program, but it's happening. And this is my I got a little carried away and forgot really the center part of the question. There's a second, third incursion. Look what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the same annihilation, slightly different, that's meted out in Genesis 6 is now meted out in Sodom and Gomorrah. Why is it that the men of Sodom want to have sex with these 2 strangers who come into town? And when Lot offers them a daughter, they go, oh, we don't want the daughters. We don't want the daughters. We want the angels. They know because their power is there. They want the power. They're already engaged. How does Nimrod, what happens at Babel? And it says very clearly, and this just came across my desk, a researcher showed it to me, which is fascinating. And it says specifically, they built with brick, not stone. The Bible is very clear and calls that out specifically. And I've always wondered about that. Now I get it. Before the flood, we see these ancient megalithic structures all over the planet. Baalbek, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Sacsayhuaman. I believe these structures are all pre-flood. After that, it is a different dynamic. And they build this ziggurat to do what? To reopen up the gateways, to reopen up the portals, and begin the angelic stuff. And who's whispering? That's what's going on. Why the Tower of Babel? And then they go down and they confuse the language. And I believe the continents at this part were broken up. And I cite Mount St. Helens for that in the book, The Cosmic Chess Match. I mean, in 24-hour period, the whole topography changed radically from one volcano. So.
Yes, it did. Okay. Well, let's jump into some of the other questions we have. We have one from Marcia. She says, what have you uncovered about persistent rumors of a UFO base being under the waters of Lake Titicaca in Peru?
Well, there are UFO bases all over the planet, and that's the best place to hide. There's one right outside of Malibu, with very, very deep water trench, very deep water trench. There's all sorts of UFO activity right around where I live, unfortunately. Yeah, hello.
What? I mean,
we get some UFO flaps in Topanga Canyon, USOs, underwater submersible objects. Lake Titicaca is certainly a place. There are all sorts of occult, shamanistic activity. I've been there to Lake Titicaca. I've been to Pumapunku, and those places are ancient places on the grid system, on the ancient grid system. Now, and they are there for a purpose, and that's real strange stuff. But it's all interconnected, and in my opinion, it all goes back to fallen angel technology. Here's why. Let me just address this one thing, and this tag teaming on to that last question.
Yeah.
When you go to a place like Sacsayhuaman and you see andesite stone that's polygonal shapes that weighs 120 tons, okay, dragged from a quarry 40 miles away. When I mean polygonal, I mean the shapes are like they're not square blocks. They're all these different cuts, different angles, and the other stones come in perfectly without mortar. It's called ashlar construction. Now, how do you move 120 ton in antiquity? But more importantly, how do you cut and carve the stone when all you've got in the Neolithic age are copper chisels? And copper chisel will not cut andesite. It's an impossibility. I don't care how you want to harden them with arsenic or anything else. It will not cut andesite stone. And it all goes back to the fallen angels. And here's the deal. We're told this in the Bible. I'm not making this up. We know that when the Antichrist comes, he seats himself in the temple. Why? Because he wants to be worshipped. What about the five I will ascend, I will do this, I will be like the Most High? Satan himself talking. I mean, we know what the end game is. So why are we surprised? Why does this stuff take us by surprise? The Bible tells us what's about to happen, and we're seeing it form right here, right under our noses.
Well, you've taken, by following some of your material, I see you've spent quite a bit of time doing research in Peru.
Yes.
What is so special about Peru?
Well, a couple of things. Peru is amazing because we're able to handle artifacts. In the States, everything is incredibly controlled. Everything is controlled here. And we've got NAGPRA, Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act, which means that you can't, as an archaeologist, we're not allowed, I'm not an archaeologist, but as an archaeologist, we are not allowed to look at Native American remains or exhume them without specific permission from tribes. And that basically shuts everything down. However, in Peru, at Senior Juan Navarro's Paracas History Museum, I walked in, and thanks to Brian Forrester, YouTube, I saw the first YouTube, couldn't believe what I was looking at, and went down there and saw these myself. This is a cast of an elongated skull that came out of Senior Juan Navarro's Paracas History Museum. You will notice that there is no sagittal suture here. And there should be a sagittal suture, which runs from the frontal plate here. You can see this suture, right?
Right.
And you can see the occipital bone in the rear. There's supposed to be a suture which divides the parietal plate. It's called a sagittal suture, which would divide the parietal plate here. Well, this doesn't occur. And, you know, the naysayers are going, all these skulls are cradle headboarded. Let me read you something.
Yep.
This is why we went to Peru. This is from 1842. These archaeologists are down there. It's a journal. I quoted this in a new book, On the Trail of a Nephilim 2. And even back then, 160 years ago, 80 years ago, this battle is raging in academia about, well, all the skulls are cradle headboarded. See? They wrap cloths around them. They bind the heads, and as the baby grows, it assumes this shape. And we agree. Yeah, you can cradle headboard the skull, but why are you doing that to begin with, one? And two, we believe and we posit that not all of the skulls are cradle headboarded. 1842, this is from the journal. And they have no photographs, but they had an artist that was with them who were making sketches over everything that they were talking about. And I show the sketch of the elongated fetus, and I'll get to that in a second, in the book On the Trail, Volume 2. This is the quote, 1842 journal. We ourselves have observed the same fact in many mummies of children of tender age, who, although they had cloths about them, were yet without any vestige or appearance of pressure of the cranium. More still, the same formation of the head presents itself in children yet unborn. And of this truth, we have had convincing proof in the sight of a fetus enclosed in the womb of a mummy of a pregnant woman, which we found in a cave 2 leagues from Tamar, and which at this moment is in our collection. Now, you can't elongate a skull,
No.
a fetus in a mother's womb. It's not going to happen.
No.
It's an impossibility, and yet that's what we see. 1842. This is a, these are all replicas, by the way. This was found in the Chongos necropolis, which is right near Paracas, and it was in Senior Juan's museum. And this is all on the trail too. Look at the size of this head.
Yes.
We're not even sure anymore, based on that quote I just gave you, how old this person is. Is it an infant? We don't know. We had a dentist look at the dentition who estimated about 18 months. When we unwrapped this skull, and Senior Juan allowed us to unwrap it, we had Dr. Aaron Junkins, an archaeologist, and Joe Taylor of the Mount Blanco Museum. You will notice the strawberry blonde color of the hair, and it's actually was more blonde and more red than what you see here. It was strawberry blonde, and when we unwrapped the head and we took it out in the sunlight, and I've actually got a shot of it, which I think I might be able to show you, we were just absolutely astounded by what we saw. Look at this shot here. This is the drawing of the fetus in the womb.
Wow, that looks like something from Steven Spielberg.
Well, it does, doesn't it? And that's from 1842. And the baby, and I want to show you this because it's just incredible. The baby skull that we unwrapped at Senior Juan's museum, which was just absolutely incredible. And here it is. And I want to show you this so you can really get a feel for what we are looking at. This is probably 15 minutes after we unwrapped the hair. And look at the color.
Oh my gosh.
Look at the color.
Right.
And you see what the problem is, that blows the Beringian land theory, where everybody came to the Americas, north, central, and south, at the end of the last ice age over the Bering Strait. Well, that might work. Some people came over. We get that. But people are curious. And I myself believe that people, because they're curious, they'll go places. They'll build ships. They'll see what's over that next mountain. But if there are people that are Nephilim, and they are fleeing the Levant 3,500 years ago, as Joshua and Caleb are pressing into what is known as the Promised Land, or the Levant, we posit that the Nephilim tribes began to flee. Some through northern Europe, others went out the Mediterranean in boats. The Paracas people show up in Paracas, Peru, about 3,500 years ago. This fits the timeline of the conquest of Canaan absolutely perfectly.
Wow.
It fits it perfectly. And guess what? All the evidence that we see, and again, look, this is groundbreaking stuff. Nobody's got this stuff except for us. And it was in our Watchers 6. And this skull here is in Watchers 8. It's in this, there's Watchers 8. The unwrapping of the skull is in Watchers 8. I mean, this is absolutely groundbreaking, literally.
Right.
Stuff. And it just, what are we looking at here? And what it does do, and it's inconclusive yet. There has been preliminary DNA testing that was done on some of the samples, 2 of the samples that came out of Peru by the late Lloyd Pye, which is going on 4 years ago. I've spoken to the geneticist. I'll tell you what he said. And he says this: whatever the sample labeled 3A has come from, it had mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown in any human, primate, or animal so far. The data is very sketchy, though, and a lot of sequencing still needs to be done to recover the complete mitochondrial DNA sequence. But a few fragments I was able to sequence from the sample indicate that if these mutations will hold, we are dealing with a new human-like creature, very distant from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. I am not sure it will even fit into the known evolutionary tree. The question is this: if they were so different they could not interbreed with humans, breeding within their small population, they may have degenerated due to inbreeding. That would explain the buried children. They were either low or not viable. I've spoken to the geneticist numerous times. We've emailed each other. I have a contract with his company. We are desperately trying to get samples out of Peru through archaeologists. We've got an archaeologist in Peru, one in Spain, and one in the Americas, 2 in the Americas. And we're all trying to get the proper permits, get the abstract finished and presented to the Ministry of Culture so we can do 2 things: test the DNA, and then based on the testing, we want to go into Chongos and we want to exhume our own skeleton and do DNA testing on that, carbon-14, the whole deal. But so far, Ron, all the evidence points to an outside agency messing with the human genome. And this ties back to the biblical paradigm, to the biblical narrative. And this is why we're so interested in doing it.
Right. Well, I can see why you're in Peru. You certainly have freedom to do some research that you're prevented from doing there in the United States and elsewhere in Europe. One of the questions that is generally listed here by a number of people is, of course, they make reference to the statement of Jesus Christ where he speaks about the angels in heaven neither marry nor given in marriage, and they use that as a way to discredit the idea of the capability of procreation of the angelic beings. What's your comment to that?
Well, I mean, it's bad exegesis, bad interpretation. He says they're not given in marriage, and if you're living for eternity, doesn't that make sense? Why would you marry? And if you're an angel, you don't need to procreate. But that doesn't mean that they're sexless. And I sort of tongue in cheek, I go, look, when we're all raptured and taken out of here, and we're in our heavenly bodies, what do you think they do? Take us into a room and airbrush out our private parts? I mean, come on. Are we going to use them? I have no idea what happens there. But we're not given in marriage. We'll be like the angels. So we move into some sort of a different realm. It doesn't mean that they are sexless. And the Bible is very clear. This is what's so important about understanding who are the sons of God. And the Bible is very clear in Job that the sons of God are the angelic host. Because B'nai Ha-Elohim is used again in Job in 3 different places. And then we've got a plethora of extra biblical sources, the book of Enoch for one, Jasher, Jubilees, which talk about the angelic host coming down and doing exactly the same thing. And then we're told in Genesis 3, the seed of the serpent. That's seed, that's procreation. So marriage and procreation are 2 different things. Jesus says you'll be like the angels, you're not going to marry. He doesn't say that you can't or that you won't. Remember, the angels left their first estate. Jude tells us that.
Yes.
They left their first estate. And then right after that, he talks about going after strange flesh, Sodom and Gomorrah, Nephilim Central, numero dos, actually traced, because I think Babel, the Tower of Babel, is when the whole thing was really happening again, which started that whole worldwide occult paradigm, which by the time Moses shows up is in full swing. This is serious stuff.
Yep. You've done a lot of research then in terms of the physical existence of these, the Nephilim, and fascinating idea in terms of their exodus from the Levant with the advent of Joshua and Moses and so on and so forth. I've got a question here from Doreen. She says, concerning modern days extraterrestrials, she says, are they beings from spiritual realms manifesting in our present, just as fallen angels did in Genesis, with their return fulfilling as it was in the days of Noah? In other words, the question there is just, when we see these other manifestations, loosely referred to as UFOs, are you saying that these are perpetrated by the same sort of beings?
Absolutely. The short answer to that is yes.
Okay.
What we are looking at are interdimensional beings, which are using these ships for two reasons. One, to get around for whatever reason. And this gets into a very lengthy discussion as far as the Greys. If the Greys are the distant, look, the Nephilim are the progeny of the unholy union between fallen angels and the women of earth. That progeny, the union, produces a progeny known as the Nephilim.
Yes.
The disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, when the flood happens, the disembodied spirits are destroyed in the flood. But the disembodied spirits become the earthbound demons, which are not fallen angels, which are earthbound. And the Greys, the little guys that we see with the big eyes, in my opinion, are created automatons where the demonic can inhabit this three-dimensional biological bodysuit, if you will. And the late David Flynn and I talked about this, and he had arrived at the same conclusion that I did, that the Greys, with their jerky automaton-like movements, were just suits that the demons were able to inhabit, which enabled them to move around in this three-dimensional time-space continuum that we're in. The fallen angels can just manifest. That's a different deal.
Okay, so let's deal with some terms here then. In terms of fallen angels, we have UFOs, we have aliens, we have demons. Let's just focus on fallen angels and demons. Are demons fallen angels, or are demons something else? Where do they
I don't believe so. I believe fallen angels are the fallen angelic host that followed the fallen one himself, Lucifer, Satan, in the rebellion. And we're not told, how long that rebellion took. I am of the persuasion that this was not an overnight deal, that this thing was brewing for quite some time. And somehow he was able to sway about a third of the host of heaven onto his side. Go figure. How does that happen? And the cosmos has now been in this war. The demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. Right. The Nephilim are the progeny of the fallen angelic host of heaven and the women of earth. Fallen angels, demons, two totally different things.
Right. So in the ministry of Jesus Christ, when the Apostle Paul, when they're confronting demons, then how would you characterize those types of confrontations? Why are they different? What makes them different?
Well, look at this. When Satan shows up, he's a fallen angel, right? And he takes Yeshua, he takes Jesus to a high place, he takes him to the temple. He's manifesting right there in front of Jesus. When he comes back, and Job, where were you? I was walking to and fro over the face of the earth. In other words, he can physically manifest himself. That's what he does. A demon needs something to inhabit, to manifest on this planet. The man of the tombs, who are you, Legion, for we are many, they're all in this one guy, which is why he's so demonically enhanced and charged in superhuman strength. Then they beg him, hey, and this is a really weird deal, it's not our time yet. How do they know that? How do they know it's not their time? And I addressed that in the Cosmic Chess Match. But basically, the time of the end doesn't look like it does 2,000 years ago, and they know that. Hey, it's not our time yet. You can't throw us into the abyss. Let us go into the herd. So they come out of the demoniac, and then they go into a herd of swine. The herd of swine, we all know the story, and they freak out and they run off the cliff. Demons need something to manifest, need something, a body to inhabit in order to manifest on this planet. They like to get into people. That's why the whole new craze with the Ouija boards this year for Christmas, man, stay away from that. That's an open door into the occult. That's an open door to invite a demonic presence into your life.
Well, if you have the influence of demons within cultures, so we're not talking about someone who has been or is currently demon possessed. That's a very controversial subject within itself. That they're being possessed by a departed spirit of a Nephilim, is what you're saying.
Correct.
So post flood, we have, according to your premise, we also have fallen angels coming and finding willing hosts to procreate with. How that copulation takes place is immaterial at this point. We're talking about hyperdimensional beings able to manipulate information to produce byproduct within the human genome. So are these individuals then that have, is there evidence of them living throughout the history of man after the flood? And then their death bringing about demons?
I would say absolutely. I'll tell you why. And this is in Armor Trail 3, sort of tip of my hand here. And perhaps I shouldn't, well, let me just say this, because it's still, let me just put it this way. I'm working on the theory, the premise, that fallen angels set up shop in numerous places all over the globe post-flood. And when they show up, just like the Book of Enoch tells us, they come with technology, they come with resources, they come with advanced mathematics, geology, they come with the sciences, and they are revered and worshipped as gods. And what happens is, mankind that is there worship the fallen angels as gods. And eventually, I think the Most High God intervenes, and that culture is wiped out. I'll just give you one example, which I don't really feel like doing, but I'm going to do it anyway because
Good.
because this is, I'm still working on this, and no one has written about it yet. But there is a city. I'm just not going to tell you where it is. There's a city I have been to, which is about 5,000 years old. It's the ruins of a city. Okay, 5,000 years old. There is no pre-existing culture before this city, and this city rises up out of nowhere. No pre-existing culture. It just boom. Archaeology. Mathematics, architecture, engineering, solar alignment, the idea of precession, equinoxes, solstices, lunar cycles, all incorporated into the structure of the city. Where did it come from? Where did this knowledge come from? All intact. Advanced mathematics, geometry, everything it just shows up out of the blue. Out of the blue. It just shows up. You can make a strong case that the Great Pyramid, the same thing. But I believe the pyramid was pre-flood.
Right. At the conference during your presentation, which of course, if our viewers are interested in seeing it, they can of course buy either the whole conference package or they can download your session, which was really engaging. You showed a picture of a skeleton of a giant. And really, and then there was the artist's representation of what that skeleton would look like if it stood upright. Tell us a little bit about that, if you can.
Well, this is actually I'm on the History Channel tonight, and the reason why they had me on In Search of the Lost Giants, because I was out in Catalina and I discovered what I would say is photographic evidence of a 9-footer. In fact, we found 2 of them. And that's what I'll be discussing this evening. But the story of this goes like this. I heard from Jim Watson, who has a book called Mysterious Catalina. We were having dinner, and Jim says, you know, they just found this cache of records and photographs and journals from Ralph Glidden that had been missing for decades in the museum attic. Well, can I look at this? That took 8 months and $1,000 check to the museum as a donation, which I was more than happy to give, to be able to access the records when I was given access to the records. Within the first hour that I was there, and I spent about 10 hours, I poured over everything. I hit pay dirt. I hit pay dirt several times before this picture, but this picture was huge. No pun intended.
Yes.
And there it is.
Yes.
And what this shows is Ralph Glidden here, who carried out primitive archaeological, sorry about that, massacred that word for a second, primitive archaeological digs in the early part of the 20th century. Specifically, this is around 1919. And notice the very large skeleton here in situ lying right in front of Ralph Glidden. What's interesting is in 1919, and this is what blows the skeptics' argument out of the water about this, rub my eyes here. Sorry. In 1919, Ralph Glidden was employed by the High Museum, and the High was later gobbled up by the Smithsonian. So at this point, he's not like a Barnum and Bailey type guy. This happens later on when he creates his museum after the money from the High Museum dries up. This is in his heyday. This is 1919. He's got no Nephilim dog in the hunt. He's working for the High. 1919. So what we did is we took Ralph, I had a triple blind study going with 3 different people using computer software that were able to analyze the skeleton, the pictures. So here's Ralph Glidden. We know he's 5'8" tall. We remove him out of the picture. This is just one of the people that did this, and we stand them upright. Then we take the skeleton and we do exactly the same thing with it. And it becomes very apparent very quickly.
Wow. Wow, it's amazing, isn't it?
We have and this, everybody put it just under 9 feet. And this may have looked something like this. Let me get to it here. It might have looked something like this. This is from Marcia.
Right. Okay. So they've done a computer animation of it as putting skin over the skeleton.
Look, we found 2. The other one that we found, let me just show you that real quick. And this is my intellectual property. I mean, I'm the guy that went in and said, Houston, we got a problem. And here's why. See, if you're not looking for something, you're not going to find it. But if you're looking for giants and 6-fingered hands, because that's what the Native Americans tell us, then guess what? You're going to find it. How many fingers do you see?
Wow. That's just bizarre, isn't it? 6 fingers.
Yeah. It's 6 fingers.
Yep.
And when we took this and we extrapolated from the size of the jawbone using computerized graphics again, and the bowl, which the curator of the museum stated was about 6 inches, according to his estimate, and he had examined thousands of artifacts. That's a 9-footer. So
wow.
We've got 2 9-footers in Catalina. And, look, everybody can jump up and down. The bottom line is, where did these go? Why aren't they there?
Well, that was my question. What happened to these skeletons? I mean, this is within 100 years. Catalina Island is off of Los Angeles.
All gone.
What happened to the skeletons?
Look, I was at the Fowler Museum in UCLA. I went in the back room. I was allowed to go back there. There was a Chumash Indian. All the remains I saw, every single one of them Native American. I have no problem with it. Every single one of them, nothing anomalous. I get it. But look, case after case after case, we hear that the bones are packed up. Remember, the High Museum was gobbled up by the Smithsonian. The former curator, John Borgina, told me that the ship carrying the skeletons sunk on the way to the mainland. How convenient is that? So there's no record of anything. And I maintain, and we are looking at right now 3 different sites, and I'm not at liberty to tell you where they are for obvious reasons, but we're working on 3 different sites and trying to get permission from Native American tribes just to exhume what we believe are giants there on their particular land. And we want to do that because it'll validate their oral history of the red-haired 6-fingered giants. We can take DNA samples, we can do carbon-14 dating, and from there we can prove and hail back to the biblical narrative. Because
right.
if a DNA evidence comes in, like I just said earlier, the mitochondrial DNA doesn't fit anything, we have 2 choices, extraterrestrial or interdimensional. And I always hold to the interdimensional fallen angelic host, which points back to the biblical narrative. And that's why we're doing this.
Right, right. So, the DNA issue is a pretty strong suit at the moment in terms of what's been currently analyzed. And so that when people say, aren't you just following rumors and this and that and the other thing, and you want it so bad you're willing to see demons and angels and Nephilim and everything, you're coming up with some pretty hard data. Question here that we have is from let's get here. It says, what form do you think the Nephilim will take when they return? What will they look like? I mean, are they walking among our midst today?
Well, the first answer to walking amongst us, I would say, we've had reports of people having encounters which they can only describe as hybrid beings.
Yeah.
And I would say the short answer to that is yes. The goal of the fallen one is to create a hybrid that doesn't look like the Nephilim of old, but that can pass for human, except it will be demonically enhanced. I'll give you one story, and I told this the other night. There was a guy who was a UFO contactee. He had been abducted. He had seen a lot of UFOs, and he was not a Christian. And he became a Christian right after this incident because he fled to a mutual friend who gave him one of my books, and then we spoke via Skype, and he told me these stories, and he was absolutely terrified and freaked out, and he accepted the Lord. And now he's bringing other people out of the UFO phenomena and getting them saved, healed, and delivered. This is his story. He fled the city he was living in to get away from the whole UFO thing. And this woman that he was seeing wound up moving also into the same town that he was living in. And, you know, he was seeing her and it was, okay, well, whatever. The strange part is this woman never took her glasses off. She always wore these dark sunglasses, never took the sunglasses off. Now, this could sound really bizarre. I can't vet this, but I spoke to the person who it happened to. He was completely freaked out. Something had happened to him, okay? And I'm going to take the man at his word. He, shortly after this experience, turned his life over to Yeshua. So you guys got to just take this as you will, okay?
Yep.
It's a colorful story. So he's over at this woman's house one night, and they're all having drinks. They're having drinks and hors d'oeuvres or whatever. And it's him, this woman, and this woman's friend. They're both wearing sunglasses. And she's got a wine glass in her hand, and a fly lands on the wine glass. And the guy sees this tongue come out of her mouth and catch the fly and go back in. And he absolutely freaks out. And at that point, she takes off her sunglasses, and her eyes aren't human, they're reptilian. And he ran. He ran for his life. He was terrified and ran out of the house into the arms of our mutual friend, Gordy, who then contacted me, and we prayed for this guy, and he gave his life to the Lord. I mean, he was absolutely freaked out.
Right.
Now, okay, if that's one story. There's other stories that come across my desk. I myself have not seen a hybrid. I do not want to see a hybrid, but because I walk in the authority of Yeshua, if I do by chance meet one, then I'm going to say, the Lord rebuke you. In the name of Yeshua, by the blood of the Lamb, the Lord rebuke you. Providing I can think. That's
right.
What I'll say.
Exactly right. I've got a question here from James. He said he's acknowledging the signs of the days of Noah, Genesis 6:5, and so on and so forth. And he says, do you think it will also be a sign of the end times? Do you think part of this can be accomplished through transhumanism and the transhumanism movement?
Everything is connected. Absolutely everything is connected. Our work, my work, our work, the Watcher series on the Mark of the Beast, we feel that these implants that, look, people are taken, they're abducted at night. They're flown through the windows. They're floated through the windows or the wall or the ceiling. They wind up on the ship. They're on the metal table. The grays are all around them. They're terrified. They can't move. They're paralyzed, and they're terrified. And they go through these excruciating procedures. And sometimes they're given implants. Sometimes up through the nose. Other times in different parts of their body. In Watchers 8, in Watcher 7, we had this man by the name of Bill, not his real name, who claimed to have an implant, all right? And we took a Gauss meter, which measures magnetic field. We took ultrasound, which shows up immediately on the ultrasound. We took x-rays and CAT scans and a stud finder. The guy had an implant, a metallic implant right below his knee. When we tried to remove it, everything was shut off. We couldn't find it, even with the ultrasound machine. We spent almost an hour and 20 minutes trying to find it in an operating theater with 2 surgeons, an ultrasound machine, nurses, 3 film crews, the whole deal. It was like it was being cloaked, and that's why we call this cloak of secrecy. It's all on film. And that's, what does the skeptic say to that? One short prayer, a little tap from the Holy Spirit, you need to pray. And I said, Father, I'm going to fill a room of unbelievers. And I said, guys, this is going to sound a little weird, but I'm going to pray and I'm going to do it now. Not asking for permission, just going for it.
Yeah.
Father, if there are forces which are cloaking this device, I pray that you would break their power and do it soon. Less than 2 minutes later, this thing shows up on the ultrasound monitor and it comes in like this. We're watching the monitor. It goes like this. It floats in like that. We all just went, oh my gosh, we were all freaked out. And then later we took the thing out. We think that these implants are DNA enhancers, that somehow they are messing with the DNA. Interestingly enough, since we removed it, which was only about 8 months ago, it was in January, well, almost a year now, okay? But 8 months ago, Bill called us and said that since the implant removal, he had lost 20 pounds without dieting. He no longer had the headaches and other symptoms that went along with the implant. So we think that these implants are the precursors to the mark of the beast.
Right. This device that you say you were in an operating theater with surgeons and you removed it. Where's that device today? And has anyone independently verified the device? Have they looked at it and given you some assessment of what it is?
Yeah, we went immediately to SEAL Lab with our chief scientist Stephen Colburn, Dr. Roger Lear, the late Dr. Roger Lear, the technician from SEAL Lab. Myself, Richard Shaw, it's all on film, and we analyzed it under a scanning electron microscope. And, what we saw was astounding. And that's hardcore, in-your-face science. It's a whole trail of evidence that any jury can see and would say, yep, he said he was abducted. By the way, there was no point of entry in the skin, no point of entry for where the implant was. There was no scar. No wound there that would have healed over, nothing. So how did it get in there?
Yeah, exactly. So where is it today?
The implant is being held by the late Dr. Roger Lear's widow right now, and we're actually working to try to figure out how we carry this research on. Right. And that's our next step.
Excellent. Question here from Jeanette. She says, we only hear of male Nephilim in the Bible. Were or are there female Nephilim?
It's a really good question. And let me just show you something for what it's worth. This is a skull that came out of Peru. It's not a giant skull. Came out of the Senior Juan Navarro's Historical Society in Paracas, Peru. It is a female.
Right. Yep.
And you'll notice, once again, the complete absence of a parietal suture, which should be there. It's not there. Only one parietal plate, not 2. Complete absence of a sagittal suture. Is this cradle headboarding? We don't know. But if it's not cradle headboarding, we go back to the 1842 journal. We go back to the preliminary DNA testing that we've got from our geneticist. If it's not cradle headboarding, then we are looking at an outside agency that is manipulating the genome, which is precisely what Genesis 3 tells us, that there's going to be a seed war between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. Why are we not? This is exactly what we should expect to see. This is exactly what we expect to see.
Right.
Based on Genesis 3. And guess what? It's all around us. A lot of it has been submerged, obfuscated, deliberately obfuscated. But that's why we go to Peru.
Right, right. A question here from Gabrielle. She says, is it possible for people who die to become ghosts and communicate with the living? Or do they forget all about forget after they died? As you're in the paranormal here, the sense of poltergeist and ghosts, does this all fall into the demonic and fallen angel realm?
The ghosts most of them are demons, and a lot of this you'll find where this kind of poltergeist activity happens, blood has been spilled. There's been a murder, there's been a death, a violent death, something, and blood is on the land, and that blood it's never been redeemed. Look at Gettysburg, and so what we see are there's two kinds. Go out on a limb here. The first kind are the demonic realm that were attached to this person and attached to the event that relived the thing over and over again. That's what they do, and they do this to tantalize humans and create a deception, in my opinion. The second may be spirits, human spirits, which are earthbound. They're stuck, and there's a possibility that they are stuck and they can't move. They can't get out for whatever reason. Now that's conjecture.
Yeah,
and
I was going to ask you.
Through that.
Yeah, because you'll need to. The second conjecture there will need to get some biblical backup. But another question here from Brandon in Ohio. He says, "Is there anything to the alleged Bigfoot or Sasquatch phenomena? Are these a representation of the Nephilim?"
Ron Moorhead is a colleague and a good friend. He accompanied us twice to Peru, helped finance the exhibition to Peru. And the reason why he did it, he was interested in finding out, and because he believed there was a similarity between the Nephilim and the elongated skulls. And the reason for this is the Sasquatch seemed to have an elongated skull. And he went on the record in Watchers 8, as a matter of fact, stating that he now believes that the Sasquatch are, in fact, Nephilim, and they are interdimensional. They move in and out. We've heard this from other people who have encountered with Sasquatch. They'll see them appear and then disappear. How's that possible? We're looking at interdimensional beings, and that's what I think that they are.
Well, that's a unique idea, because you see these programs on the History Channel and Discovery and so on and so forth, where they're trying to run down Bigfoot in that sense, and the problem is there's evidence, but yet it seems to be so spurious, and they seem to appear here and appear there, and in the Pacific Northwest, and then there are reports in Nepal and all these various places where you seem to have these different beings appearing, but making them hyperdimensional is an interesting idea. Here's a question from Matthew from Ohio. He says, what is your thoughts as to why we are seeing a massive increase of UFO spottings and reported alien abductions?
We're in the last days, and this is like the days of Noah. And he's, as Chuck Missler says himself, elder brother Chuck states, and we've got it on film. Satan is outnumbered 2-1. He's building an army. I love when Chuck said it. He just kind of like a throwaway line. I said, Chuck, I basically asked that question to Chuck, and Chuck instantly said, Satan's outnumbered 2-1. He's building an army. Just like that, just bam, there was the answer. Just started laughing and said, yeah, he is, isn't he? So there you go.
An army that'll lose. Going back to the idea of these artifacts that seem to appear and disappeared, Don asks this question. He says, who do you think is responsible for the cover-up of these artifacts?
Without a doubt, the Smithsonian. Without a doubt, in my mind, with all due respect to the Smithsonian. I'll give you one example. At the Field Museum in Chicago, this is on Betrayal of Nephilim, Volume 1. There's a very large stone axe head, it's a very large spear point, and the caption is, "This was a ceremonial spearhead used by the Hopewell." And I said to the archaeologist there, through a series of emails, I said, "Where was the artifact found?" Possibly say, see, they make stuff up. How can you possibly say this was ceremonial, where we've got accounts of weapons just like this being next to 9-footers that are interred? How's that work?
Right. So certainly the Smithsonian, of course, this is something that's worldwide, though. It's not just limited to the United States.
Correct.
You have throughout Europe, there seems to be early historical accounts of giants. We refer to them as the Greek and Roman myths. The reports, of course, of what took place in Babylon and in Egypt,
Sure.
and so on and so forth.
Sure.
But there's no hard evidence as you're finding in South America.
Well, look, it's everywhere. It's in North America, Central America. It's all throughout Europe. I mean, think of the structures of Baalbek. Think of the America Stonehenge right here in New Hampshire, which links back to what we feel is a Nephilim site. I mean, it's everywhere. Once you start, and that's why I wrote the books. I mean, the evidence is there. You got to look at it yourself. Look at the pictures. They're oversized books. They're 8.5 by 11, and they're full colored pictures, and the pictures are all the way through the books. So as you're reading, you just go, "Oh wow, look at that!" It's like as close to being here as we could possibly make it, and we do that. Here's the evidence. You be the judge, you know, and a lot of it's scientific evidence. And so far, we're on the trail, and it seems to be pointing back to the Nephilim, which validates the biblical narrative, and that's why we're doing this.
Well, there's also another facet to all of this in that there is an ever-increasing interest and fascination. Oops, what happened to my... There we go. There seems to be an ever-fascinating fascination with extraterrestrials, with hybrids, all of the superhero movies. I mean, people seem to be absolutely obsessed, desiring connection with something that's otherworldly that will allow them to do something greater than they can do through their normal human means.
Bible warns us of this. I mean, why do we find it strange when it begins to manifest? Katy Perry is doing the halftime show at the Super Bowl with the U.S., and I guarantee it that it's going to be another occult spectacle rammed down everybody's throats. Look, the fallen one is ramping everything up. He's preparing the ground. He's preparing the objective. He's softening the objective. And the objective is planet Earth. And when he shows up right on the heels of the whole Darwinian theory, when Ben Stein sits down with Richard Dawkins and says, "Where do we come from?" Dawkins says, "Well, we were created by aliens." I'm doing it really quickly, but we were created by aliens millions of years ago and seeded here, panspermia. That's what the Darwinian paradigm, they don't believe in a God of the Bible. What's coming? Look, Yeshua warns us, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Men faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth. It's already here. I'm not making this stuff up. Right. It's already here. It's manifesting around us. The church needs to wake up. People need to put on the armor of God every day and decide. Chuck mentioned this. It's like he was quoting Mark Twain at the KI conference and saying the two most important days, the day we're born and the day we find out why. And I've never forgotten that since I heard that. Mark Twain, so Chuck's quoting Mark Twain, but it's brilliant, and it's true. The day we were born and the day we find out why. I know why I'm here doing what I'm doing. I'm firing on all 8 cylinders. And God's got me raised up for a time such as this. Why? I have no idea, except I'm in it up to my eyeballs. And I point back as often as I possibly can to the blood of Jesus, to the Savior of all mankind, that when we accept him as Lord, as Savior, when we confess our sins, when we realize what happened on Calvary, then our sins can be forgiven, all those little nasty things, and we become reborn. We get pulled out of the matrix of the world, out of the world system of the fallen one, and we begin to become like him. And at some point in time, we will see him. We will know as we are known, and we get eternal life out of that deal. It's incredible. And I believe he's coming soon. I really do.
Amen to that. And L.A., thank you very much for taking this time to address our audience. I think you've given everybody plenty to think about. And again, those of you that have been viewing this live or will later view it through the YouTube channel, I encourage you to be a good Berean. Check out all things. But L.A., we thank you for being with us, and we thank you for taking the time to view this broadcast. And may God bless you as you continue to study his word.
It's my hypothesis that there is a breeding program going on between the fallen angelic host of heaven and the women of earth.
I'm going to be talking about something that is so controversial that a lot of you are going to think I'm a heretic, a blasphemer.
Many of the things that we study today, the real challenge is to get rid of the traditions behind it and understand what the text really says.
But you know, we could all say that the world has all been here before, and yet the world has never been here before.
China sees their responsibility not just within their borders, but covering the globe.
I honestly believe that after you hear the information in this talk, you truly will be smarter than the vast majority of PhD scientists on this planet.